Okay, members, are we all sitting comfortably? It's 18:31. I need to commence the meeting. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of Western Area Planning Committee. I am Councillor Phil Barnett, the chairman of this particular committee. The other members of the committee present tonight, I've got Billy Drummond, councillor, Paul Dick, councillor, the vice chairman, Clive Hooker, councillor, Howard Williston, councillor, Dr. Tony Vickers, councillor, councillor Martin Colson, councillor Dennis Gaze, and councillor Asian Amps. I've said it the other way round on the other side of the table. Okay, right, continuing on. Yes, you look rather amazed, but I thought I'd change my introduction tonight, Councillor Abs, that's all.
That's very good. Nice to mix it up a bit, isn't it?
We're also assisted tonight by the following officers, and sitting to my right tonight is Matthew Shepherd. As you noticed, it's not Deborah Instrom. Matthew is now the interim team manager at development management, and I believe he's going to assist me from now onwards, correct? And furthermore, I do need to congratulate him because I think he's just returned off of honeymoon.
Yeah.
Continuing on, to my far right, I've got Jake Brown, Principal Planning Officer. To my left, I've got Sharon Armour, Legal Services Manager and obviously support me in any legal matter. To my far right is Paul Goddard, waving his hands, Highways Development Control Team Leader. To my far left, I've got Thomas Radburn, is going to clerk tonight. And to my far left, further behind, is Stephen Chard, who's going to be the Zoom host. Before we start this evening's meeting, I would like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, importantly, respect. Members across the chamber may not always agree with one another, but I would like to ask them in our disagreements, we endeavour to always be respectful of other people's views. If we hear an evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the meeting immediately. Please proceed the safe emergency exit route and please follow any instructions that will be given by officers. The assembly point is at the car park at the Dolphin Pub, and obviously I'm looking towards members of the public. I hope you know where the Dolphin Pub is. Perhaps we could see a nod, because somebody did mention to me after the last meeting they weren't certain exactly which route they should take to the Dolphin Pub. It's actually, the assembly point is actually the car park behind the pub itself. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such a time as it's safe to proceed. Members, do you have any questions in the way that we are going to conduct the meeting before I start?
No, Chair.
No? Okay, thank you very much. No, I'm hoping that members of the public are not here for the item which refers to item 4/1, application 26/0036/MDO PO Street Record Spring Meadows Great Shepherd, because unfortunately it's had to be deferred and it won't be taken this evening. So moving on to Thomas, apologies, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies received from Councillor Nigel Foote, with Councillor Billy Drummond attending as a substitute.
And welcome, Super Sub, Councillor Drummond. Moving on to item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of July. This one will be considered at the next Western Area Planning Committee meeting, which I believe is the 16th of September. Okay, members. Item 3, declarations of interest. Going around the table, Councillor Drummond.
Yeah.
Councillor
Chairman.
Dick.
I've had some correspondence about the application in Hermitage, but I'll mention that again later.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hooker.
Nothing, Chairman.
Councillor Woolston.
Nothing, Chairman.
Councillor Vickers.
Town Council Planning and Highways Committee and also of its subcommittee.
Excuse me, councillor Vickers.
Sorry, I'm a member of Newby Town Council Planning and Highways Committee and its subcommittee that's dealing with public rights of way in the town, and that relates to the item at 13 Woodside later in the programme. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't attend any meeting where this was discussed, by the way, specifically.
Councillor Coulson.
None from me, Chair.
Councillor Gaines.
Correspondence on the heritage item, Chairman. So the 3 Blake Road.
Councillor Habs.
No, nothing from me, Chairman.
And from the chair, I'm obviously also a member of Newby Town Council's Planning and Highways Committee. I was present at the meeting that discussed Woodside, but I abstained and I didn't get involved in the discussions regarding the application. Okay, moving on to item 4, brackets 2, application 26/00854/PIP, land to the rear of 13 Woodside, Newbury. Now, for those who perhaps are new to this meeting, I will briefly explain the procedure. Officers will present the application to the committee, after which the following groups might wish to make representations for a maximum of 5 minutes each. Parish Town Council representatives, the objectors, supporters, the applicant and or the agent, and then ward members. The committee members will have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification of the speakers, and members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of officers. Members of the public and speakers will not be able to engage with committee members and officers outside this particular spot that they might have when they're actually speaking. And in this case, we are very particular regarding members of the public to obviously only stand at the lectern when it's appropriate to speak and not obviously engage with any members of the committee at any time. When these processes have been completed, the committee will then debate the item in front of them before determining the application. I then move on to this particular application I've just mentioned, and I'm going to invite Jake Brown to present the application as the member, as the officer responsible for this particular application. Over to you, Jake. All behind us.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks permission in principle for a residential development of one new detached dwelling on land to the rear of 13 Woodside, Newbury. This application for permission in principle has been brought to this committee for determination as more than 10 representations have been received objecting to the development proposed, and the recommendation by officers is to delegate to the development manager to grant permission in principle. The application site is located to the rear of 13 and 14 Woodside, as shown in the plan here, and comprises an existing access from Woodside here to land that was previously occupied by 3 garages and land that is part of the rear garden of number 13 Woodside. To the east, adjacent to the site, is an area of woodland covered by a tree preservation order, beyond which are the residential properties fronting Woodridge. To the southwest is an area of overgrown vegetation and some trees. To the northwest are the existing rear gardens and dwellings fronting Woodside. And to the northeast is the end of the rear garden serving number 12 Woodside. This photo shows the existing access from Woodside that previously served the 3 garages on the site and is to be used as an access to the proposed dwelling. Here is a view at the end of the access road within the site, with the boundary fence for number 14 Woodside on the left. The southwestern boundary of the application site curves southeastwards from this point here around to here. This is a view from within the site looking southwest. The public right-of-way application referred to in the agenda report would run along the existing access road and turn southwestward here to join with Pond Close. At the time of this meeting, a public right-of-way has not been adopted. In any event, the access is existing and vehicle movements associated with one dwelling would be limited and not considered to represent a fundamental issue for the use of the site proposed. This is a view of the southeastern boundary of the site with the area of protected trees on the left, which are located within the gardens of dwellings on Woodridge. This is a view from within the site looking north towards the rear elevations of number 14 Woodside and number 13 Woodside. And here we have a view of the northeastern boundary of the site with the rear elevations of number 11 and 12 Woodside. This is the illustrative block plan proposed. It is important to note that the scope of this permission in principle application is limited to whether the proposed location, land use and amount of development is acceptable. Any details showing the proposed dwelling are illustrative only, and all matters relating to design, layout, scale, access, impact on neighbours, trees, drainage, biodiversity and technical constraints are not relevant to this application and are expressly reserved for the determination at the technical details consent stage if this planning permission in principle is granted. In respect of location, the site is within the designated settlement boundary of Newbury and is considered to be in an accessible location. Therefore, it is considered that the location of the development would be acceptable in principle. The use proposed is residential, which is consistent with both the surrounding character of the area and the objectives of the local plan review to deliver new housing within sustainable locations. Therefore, it is considered that the use proposed would be acceptable in principle. The amount of housing proposed is 1 dwelling. The erection of 1 dwelling would represent a modest increase in the density of development and would not, by reason of its scale alone, result in a form of development that would fundamentally conflict with or harm the established residential character of the area. Any visual effect as a result of the proposed dwelling would be minimal and very localised. Although some reduction in openness would occur, it is not considered that the amount of development proposed would fundamentally undermine the prevailing character of the locality or result in an unacceptable departure from the established pattern of development. The relationship between the new single dwelling and the properties on Woodside would be similar to that between the properties on Woodside and those on Elizabeth Avenue. Accordingly, the site is considered capable, in principle, of accommodating the proposed amount of development without causing unacceptable harm to the character of the area. Many representations received raise issues such as impact on drainage, neighbouring amenity, trees, biodiversity, visibility space, construction access and traffic management, and parking arrangements, which all relate to matters that would be dealt with at the technical details consent stage should permission in principle be granted. The granting of this permission in principle does not imply that approval of technical details consent will be forthcoming. The planning practice guidance makes it clear that it is not possible for conditions to be attached to the grant of permission in principle. As noted on the update sheet, since the publication of the committee agenda report, a revised National Planning Policy Framework was published by National Government on Monday, the 17th of August, and is a material consideration in the determination of this application. Officers have reviewed the proposal against the new national decision-making policies and are satisfied that the recommendation remains unchanged. In conclusion, at permission in principle stage, The assessment is limited by legislation. The proposal relates to a site within a sustainable settlement, seeks appropriate residential use, and proposes a modest and clearly defined amount of development. Having regard to the adopted West Berkshire Local Plan Review and the matters that can lawfully be considered at this stage, it is considered that there are no in-principle objections to the proposed development. Therefore, the recommendation by officers is to delegate to the development manager to grant permission in principle. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Before I move over to the list of speakers, Paul Goddard, Paul, have you anything to comment on highways?
Yes, please, Chairman. While this proposal is in principle, we have assessed it as follows. The site has an existing access onto Woodside with existing sight lines. The previous use of the site was for 3 garages. There would have been vehicle movements associated with those garages when they were in use. I do not consider that the dwelling would increase vehicle movements from when the site was used for 3 garages. The layout of the site is illustrative at this stage. I do consider all requirements such as car parking provision, cycle storage, electric vehicle charging points will be able to be provided when detailed submissions are provided. I do note local concerns. There's quite much concern about construction traffic, and we would apply a construction management plan to manage construction during that, for instance, limiting the size of vehicles, contractor parking, deliveries, etc. Should later on detailed planning applications come in. But at the moment, yes, it's in principle, but those things would be addressed and in my view can be addressed, and therefore no objection is raised, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Paul. No one from Newbury Town Council had registered by 1600 hours yesterday afternoon, so I therefore move immediately over to the objector, Alistair Douglas, who I believe is on Zoom. Alistair, can you hear us?
Mr. Douglas is with us on Zoom. Just needs to unmute and address us.
Right, I think I'm here. Can you hear us?
Hello? Yes.
Hello. Yes.
You can hear us. Okay.
Brilliant, thank you.
Have you been following the proceedings up to this point?
Yes, we have, yes.
Right, okay. So you've got 5 minutes speaking. Do you wish to be notified after 4 minutes?
No, it won't take that long. It's okay.
Okay, and can you make sure that you're still on Zoom at the end of your presentation in case members have got questions for you, please?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so are you about to commence?
Yes.
Okay, over to you then, Alistair.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, members of the committee. Thank you for your time. The proposed site is directly behind our home, 14 Woodside, and we are devastated. If approved, this development will fundamentally damage our home life, both during construction and long after. We are speaking tonight on behalf of 20 local objectors. This planning in principle application is not about sustainable development. It's a single bungalow benefiting one individual to the detriment of many others. First, the topography is fundamentally incompatible. The site is heavily elevated directly behind us, meaning a bungalow here will look straight down into our entire home, completely stripping away our privacy. Because of the restrictive plot layout, the only side of the building receiving proper daylight will directly face our windows. This is a fundamental flaw that simply cannot be mitigated later. We were also deeply confused by the tree officer's comments, and we urge you to question them. The existing concrete base is far smaller than the proposed build. It will have to be removed for foundations and drainage. This will inevitably damage the root systems, destabilizing massive, heavily swaying trees and creating an active safety hazard for nearby properties and future occupiers. Finally, the access is unsafe. The proposed driveway has been dormant for over 50 years. There have been no garages there for 50 years. It cannot be widened and is far too narrow for construction machinery. Plus, there is a PROW in action for it, which would mean that young children from Pond Close can be directly walking down that to school every day if it's granted, potentially walking straight into oncoming traffic. This backland development is invasive, dangerous, and overwhelmingly opposed by the neighbourhood. For the safety of anyone who might live under those trees, and for the protection of our young children's privacy, we urge you to reject this application. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Just hold on. I'm just looking around the table. Councillor Vickers has a question for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. That was a very clear and concise and I think impressive speech of yours. Can I ask, you referred to the access road. Yes, it is very narrow. Do you ever see even local cars parked there? Because it is in the street. And wouldn't you agree?
No, we've lived there for 14 years and we've never seen a car drive down there. The only vehicle that goes down there is the council's. I think it's like to go and cut the grass in the woodland behind, like a smaller vehicle.
From your local knowledge, therefore, do you think it's possible to even park in that access road and open the door to get out? It's a similar problem that we get in garages because they're built for much smaller cars.
You can get a car down there, but probably not open the doors on the way down.
Right.
And if you're talking about heavy machinery, yeah, no chance in my view.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Further questions at all, members? No. Okay. There's no further questions. Obviously, you're more than welcome to listen to the rest of the discussions. Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move over to Matt Williams, the agent. Okay. If you come to the lectern, again, 5 minutes and possibly questions afterwards. Do you want to be notified after 1 minute? Sorry, after 4 minutes?
Can do, Chair. I shouldn't be that long.
Okay.
But yeah, that'd be helpful. Thanks, just in case.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am Matt Williams of Brimble Lee, the agent for this application, speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Clark, who is here with me. I would like to start by commending Mr. Brown's report, which provides a very comprehensive and an impartial assessment of this application for permission in principle, or PIP, as I shall refer to it. Now, as you have noted from Mr. Brown's report and presentation, the only matters that can be considered at this PIP stage are the site location, the proposed land use, and the amount of development. Mr. Brown's report and his update report confirm that the site is within the settlement boundary and in a sustainable location, and it is not with any designated, protected, or allocated areas of particular importance. The site location therefore complies with the development plan as a matter of principle. In the update report, the new National Planning Policy Framework, Policy S4, now states that development proposals within settlements should be approved unless the benefits of doing so would be substantially outweighed by any adverse effects. And none of the adverse effects stated in Policy S4 applied to this proposal. This presumption applies even with the council's 5-year supply of housing land. In terms of land use, Mr. Brown's report confirms that the site is within an established residential area and the proposed residential land use is therefore compatible with its surroundings. In terms of the amount, one dwelling on the site will achieve a net density of 37.6 dwellings per hectare, which complies with the aims of Policy SP1 to achieve net density developments of at least 35. The amount of development therefore complies with Policy SP1, and this density confirms that the proposal will not result in an overdevelopment as a matter of fact. As you've heard and seen, the focus of most objections relate to this active Section 53B application with the council, which is trying to claim an established public right-of-way over the applicant's private access road to the site. Now, this separate non-planning application has no bearing whatsoever on this application for PIP, but Mr. Brown's report, and as you heard, confirms in any event that the access exists and vehicle movements associated with one dwelling would be limited. Also, the applicant already has a right to drive along his access, irrespective of this application for PIP and the public right-of-way claim. And in response to suggestion by an objector that it's never used, Mr. Clark confirmed that very recently tree surgeon drove up the access with a chipper and was able to turn and come back out. The council were down there the other week to unblock a drain using the access road, so it is in use. Now, you will have also noted from the planning history and again heard from Mr. Brown that the site and access was previously used for 3 garages and planning permission was granted for 4 more garages unconnected to any specific dwellings in Woodside. This means people using these garages would have been walking up and down the access road with cars potentially coming in and out, but without any recorded concerns by the council or any accidents. Mr. Brown's report correctly states that the other concerns raised in respect of amenity, drainage, trees, biodiversity and parking will be fully addressed at the technical detail consent should PIP be granted. Your officers will confirm, in fact, Mr. Brown said, that granting PIP does not mean that anything goes because the technical...
Well, now on 4 minutes.
Right, thank you. Because the technical details must comply with policies as if it were a full planning application, albeit with the principle of a single-storey dwelling established. There are no inherent constraints that rule out the possibility of developing a single-storey dwelling on the site as a matter of principle, and we therefore sincerely hope that you will grant PIP in accordance with the recommendation and the presumption in favour of development plan compliance. Thank you very much for your time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Vickers to start with.
Mr. Williams, you've referred to the garages and their past use and the use of the track. Yeah, and I accept that it is possible to drive up and down that track. But I'm sure you're aware as a planning professional that this council no longer counts garages as vehicle parking spaces. And that's because, of course, vehicles are much wider now than they were when those garages were built. And that's the reason. And therefore, the past use of that land for garages, I would argue, is, wouldn't you agree, really irrelevant to this application?
I'm sorry, sir, I absolutely would not agree with that. It was an established site for garages with cars going up and down, and you've heard from Mr. Shepherd that there are no issues from a highway safety point of view in respect to cars going up and down.
But if I can ask supplementary, Chairman, there is no extra specific class use, is there, for garages? It's part of, I agree, it's part of residential land, and therefore it's part of residential land, but I've not heard of any specific use class for garages separate from residential use in general. And since we don't use garages for private parking, then I'm just arguing that this is irrelevant. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, no, obviously I wouldn't agree with that because
Well, I'll take it up with
because I think garages serve residential properties. I think it's a rather sweeping statement to say that garages aren't used for parking. People do use garages for parking, and this site was used for parking vehicles. It had garages on. And as I said, planning permission was granted for 4 additional garages. So the site had that established use for cars coming in and out. And as I said in my presentation, people would have been walking up and down to get to the garages, potentially with cars coming in and out. So I don't think you can perhaps sort of disregard that planning history as being irrelevant. It is a matter of fact that cars came up and down there and parked.
I'm not arguing with a matter of fact in the past. I'll take it up with officers later. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Okay.
Right, Tony, Councillor Vickers, I think I've asked for further clarification from the officer at the appropriate time. Right, Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. I think I'm being asked this evening to judge whether anything could be put on this site.
So I'm kind of curious as to why you put any building example in your red line diagram.
A simple reason. This application specifically asks for permission in principle for a single story dwelling. Okay. And in preparing the application, we would potentially anticipate the case officer, members of the public, town council, or even perhaps you members saying, well, how do we know that a single story dwelling can actually fit on the site with the access, parking, a garden? So we intentionally put in an illustrative plan to show that a single story dwelling can be achieved. Now, as you heard from Mr. Brown, and it's caveated, you are not being asked to approve that dwelling shown on the plan. The resulting dwelling, when all the relevant studies are done for technical details, it might shrink, it might enlarge, but it will be a single story dwelling in line with the pit if it's granted. But we put it in for illustrative purposes to see how, or really to show how it could work.
Let me try and help you. So you've put it in to give me an example of how it would work. Is that fair to say? So if I disagree with what I'm looking at, and you'd be okay with me disagreeing with, I don't agree maybe with what you've put in. I'm just trying to understand. You put it in for illustrative purposes. So you've illustrated to me potentially that it either works or doesn't work, depending on where my mind sits.
Yeah, I mean, we're not asking that term agreement on that plan. What we're saying is, if through these discussions and in granting pit, you feel that a single story can go on there, but a dwelling can go on there, but perhaps you think the footprint's too big.
Well, we don't get to decide those things.
No, I appreciate, but you asked me about if you were going to agree or disagree with the plan we provided, and we would probably expect, whether it be an informative or a subsequent email, it would be noted that you think perhaps in passing that the footprint is too big, but that will be informed by a range of surveys, like for instance a tree. You know, we'll have a tree survey done, root protection areas. We'll need to avoid the root protection areas.
There's the detail we don't need to discuss this evening. So let's just move on. I'll ask the question I needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, further questions around the table at all? No. Okay. You can return to the public seats. And I call upon Councillor David Marsh. Now, are you the only ward member speaking tonight?
Yes, he is.
I just asked specifically because I know you were speaking, and I'm not.
We discussed it beforehand that I didn't want to discuss before debate this evening, so this is over to David.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Sorry, David.
Okay, so that means I get the full 5 minutes, I assume, Mr. Chairman.
Correct.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Over to you, and the time starts as soon as you commence your speech.
Thank you. If this is about permission in principle, I'm sorry to say that it seems to me a very bad principle that would be even worse if it were to be put into practice. What the principle seems to mean is if you buy an old council house from Sovereign and are lucky enough to find the remains of a hard standing that had garages on it half a century ago, you can build a house on it. To me, this seems less of a principle, more of a loophole. Principle or not, in terms of its effect on neighbouring residents, this may be the single worst application I've seen in 7.5 years as a councillor. A really important factor here that I urge members to take into account is the unusual irregular shape of the land that the owner of number 13 acquired when buying the property. The previous owners, first the council and then Sovereign, having been unable or unwilling to agree to a coherent pattern and shape of ownership for this land, It now comprises a dog's breakfast of bits of woodland, bits of number 13's back garden, and a narrow access road, as we've heard, that until very recently served as entrance to a path through the woods. So if you look at the map, you can see that if development on this side are to go ahead, number 14 Woodside would find itself surrounded on three sides by number 13, its back garden, the new property, and the access road. Sadly, nobody seems to have thought much about the residents of number 14, to whom, as you have heard, this proposal has caused considerable distress. Those of us on the site visit last week who viewed the proposed site from inside number 14 could see how elevated the site is. There is no way a new property built there could not grossly overlook number 14. Rather than say this is a technical matter to be decided in the future, I cannot see why this should not already preclude the principle of building on this site. Turning back to the map, I hope members will agree that the proposed backland development, which is way out of line with all the other properties in Woodside, sticks out like a sore thumb into that area of woodland, the woodland between Woodside at the foot of the hill and Woodridge on the crest of the hill, which is very highly valued locally. And you can see it is the only patch of green in this particular area. To residents of Woodside and Woodridge, this is not, quote, modest intensification within an established residential area. It is anything but modest if it sets a precedent for building houses in the middle of the wood. Muntjac deer, bats, foxes, badgers and other regular wildlife are regularly seen in these woods. The updated National Planning Policy Framework, to which we've just heard reference, refers to conserving and enhancing the natural environment. This proposal cannot conceivably conform to that requirement. There are other concerns, such as potential flooding, the fact that part of the site lies under the tree canopy, and the threat to the roots of protected trees, all mitigating against the suitability of this site for development. I understand the point that such matters as access, design, impact on trees and drainage may be considered at a later date, but in the real world, giving permission in principle means that it's likely to be given in practice, especially since, as officers and members will be well aware, the government is about to curtail the rights of residents and indeed councillors to object to or call in such applications as any application would be for building on this site. So if it's improved in principle, we all know that sooner or later there's going to be a house there. Turning to the public right-of-way issue, until very recently the path through the woods between Woodside and Pond Close, and then further to Falkland Garth and the shops at Monument Close in Wash Common, was a popular, well-used route for pedestrians, including children and carers walking to John Ranking School. Exactly the kind of active travel that the council's environment strategy, the local plan, and indeed the MPPF purport to encourage.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair. I've done it many times, that walk. It's a really nice little walk, or it was. It's no longer possible unless you particularly enjoy being chased away or recorded on a camera installed nearby. If this application is approved, it's bound to make this contentious issue worse, causing continuing friction between neighbours and potentially storing up major problems over shared access to the new property and the public right-of-way, including the safety of pedestrians trying to use it. In effect, it is preempting the public right-of-way process, and it seems only reasonable to at least await the outcome of that before deciding whether or not this site may be developed. Members, I urge you to listen to our residents. 21 objections. There are only 22 houses in Woodside. 21 objections, which is a large number from a small road. Passionately and eloquently argued. I hope you've read them. I urge you to listen to these arguments, and the Town Council too is opposed to this proposal. It's not a suitable site for development, either in principle or in practice, and I hope you will refuse this application. Thank you, members.
Right, thank you, Councillor Marsh. Questions for Councillor Marsh? No? Okay. Okay. Thanks very much. You can return to your seat, Councillor Marsh. I did actually, the comment I was trying to make was that there was 3 on the list. There's 3 members for the ward, Councillor Abbs, and I was under the impression that there was 1 person speaking. So sorry, I didn't engage you initially, but there was 3
I thought
names.
you'd forgotten I was a member of the ward there for a moment, Phil.
Oh, okay. Right, members. Questions of officers. Right, Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that this is an application for this build in principle, but I've got a feeling that one would think a little bit of common sense might have been considered when this was actually drawn up. The three questions, and I think Mr. Brown should be able to do all of these. I mean, I look at this, and this is from personal experience of trying to build a bungalow in the back of somebody's garden and the problems I've had with another authority. The first question I come up with here is the amenity area. We do have a minimum. I mean, time you put in a bike store, bin store, and you put your washing line up, I know it's in principle and that footprint can go down. This is why I come back to common sense. Maybe you could give me some idea of what the amenity area is and what our minimum is. Secondly, conveniently, the cars are shown parked pointing outwards. Again, I know the footprint might go in, but I'm looking at that. How do I turn this car around when I drive in to get out? I know it's in principle. And thirdly, maybe you give me an idea, Mr. Brown, of the distance from 13 and 14 to the proposed development. And I noticed on the front of the proposed development, there are windows which do overlook the rear of 13 and 14. I know it's in principle, but maybe as I come back to the common sense, is this feasible?
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the amenity area, I would stress again that that is not a consideration by legislation at this point in time. Any forthcoming technical details consent application would have to demonstrate that it's in accordance with the council's policies and guidance on amenity provision. For information, at this stage, I believe the amenity provision for a 3+ bed house is 120 square metres. I'll be corrected if my colleagues find that information and confirm sooner. And for a smaller house, it is 70 square metres, sorry, 100 square metres for a three or more bedroom house and 70 square metres for a 1 or 2 bed house and bungalows. But that would be determined at the technical details consent stage. The second point was the car parking. Again, that would be determined at the consent stage, and the parking arrangements and method of access and egress would be assessed by my colleague Paul Goddard in Highways for its safety of movement. And then lastly, in respect of the distance, so the distance from the site boundary to the elevation of number 14 is approximately 13 metres to the rear elevation of number 14.
What's the minimum that we normally ask? Sorry, Chair, what's the minimum distance that we normally ask for?
21.
17, isn't
it? 21 it is.
21. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And if I may just come back on that again, I mean, I know it's in principle, but I come back to common sense. Have you sort of give it some consideration how this gross internal of 94 square metres will have to reduce just to accommodate the amenity area? I mean, I come back, you know, we don't like office space being turned into apartments because they're just too small. I mean, how small does this have to get to say, I'm going to achieve this principle? Thank you. And was it considered, or was it not on your remit to say this has got to go down and it's going to be ridiculously small to accommodate all the other requirements? Not in your remit at this stage.
It's not the legislation is quite clear. It's not within the remit to be considered at this stage.
Okay, right, Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report and the questions. When I arrived, my obvious thought immediately was, I wonder who owns this lane and the access. But of course, immediately realised that that's not a planning issue. There's access there. If there's an issue around that, it's a civil matter. I then thought, oh, well, it's going to be quite difficult to fit something in that doesn't cause some difficulty, whether it be drainage, overlooking neighbours, etc. And then I remembered, of course, that these things are not to be considered. So the only question that I was left with, and again, it's peripheral rather than directly relevant, much has been made about the footpath and rights of way. And I'm a big fan of footpaths. I've got big feet. So let us assume that we agree to the PIP. And let us assume this application goes through. Are those two things compatible, Mr. Officer?
Chairman, the consideration of the public right of way application is not for this committee.
But that's a helpful answer to a different question. Thank you.
Okay.
That's why it's here, Chairman.
And then Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll speak to Mr. Brown, but I really want to speak to a tree officer. Given the concerns raised by residents about the adjacent woodlands and protected trees, can the tree officer assessment be clarified, particularly the conclusion that the site is capable of accommodating one dwelling while ensuring that near trees are adequately protected through the later technical drawing consents? Can you enlighten us on the tree officers, or you can't speak for them?
The tree officer, in their response to the application, notes that the dwelling, as shown in the illustrative plan, is close to the tree protected area, and that there was or is currently a concrete slab there, and the difference in ground levels makes it unlikely that the root protection areas of the TPO would be affected. The tree officer also notes that there's an area of woodland to the southwest that's not covered by a TPO. And works may impact the root protection areas of those trees. But ultimately, the tree officer concludes that the proposal is agreeable if adequate protective measures are put in place with the use of specialist material and an arboricultural method statement. So, in essence, whilst tree matters aren't for consideration at this stage, the tree officer is indicating that it is possible to accommodate the development proposed without detrimentally impacting on trees.
Yeah. Right, Councillor Coulson.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question about whether privacy is a material consideration for planning, not for today, but I too was on the site visit and agree with Councillor Hooker that anything built there will look straight into number 14 and several other houses. And I just want to be clear that if consent is given today, whether that becomes a material planning point to the next phase, please.
The permission in principle and the technical details consent stages are two stages that make up together the whole planning permission. It simply means that if permission in principle is granted today, then effectively the applicant can move forward to the technical details consent stage. It doesn't have any bearing in sense of whether the technical details consent stage would be approved in itself.
I understand that, but I just want to know if in the technical development stage is privacy or reduction in privacy a material planning consideration?
Sorry, yes, it is. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right, Councillor Vickers, I think. Are you going to ask the question when you were obviously questioning the applicant? I think it might be appropriate to.
Yeah, that was the main question. I mean, there's another point, but I don't think I need to question officers about it. It's a point that Mr. Shepherd raised when he made his presentation, and that I will address in the debate. But the question is, I think, about whether the fact that it was used as garages in the past is relevant to the whole case that we're deciding here and now, because you wouldn't be building garages there now, would you, of that sort of size?
Well, you're asking the question of the officer, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, a garage as a place for parking a car and therefore for regularly driving backwards and forwards without a house there doesn't seem to be relevant to what we're looking at now, and yet it was raised by the applicant in his speech.
Did you want to comment on that?
Jake, do you want to? You're right, Hackman. Yeah.
Chairman, the site was previously, or part of the site was previously used for 3 garages serving residential properties. So they were as ancillary residential use to the residential properties on Woodside. Whilst they may have been demolished, the use of the land hasn't fallen away, and the land is still considered previously developed land. Another part of the site is also part of the garden area of number 13, so that's considered residential use land as well. In terms of the material consideration of the garages, it does have some bearing. The access was previously accepted as being used by vehicular traffic to serve the garages, but it's not the be-all and end-all, so to speak, in the sense that the site is still within the settlement boundary. Part of it is previously developed land. Even on the basis of just those considerations, the permission in principle would be acceptable.
One other question as well, that was helpful, and that is, we've heard how many members think this is going to be a difficult, even if we accept officer's recommendation and we give it permission in principle, it's going to be an extremely difficult site to successfully get through the so-called technical stage. So if at the end of the 3 years for which permission is granted in principle, there is no valid application approved, does the permission lapse, was my question. And are we back to where we are now?
Yeah, you've got to submit your technical matters within 3 years. If you don't, you have to go back to stage 1 and permission.
Just a submission rather than an actual decision on the application within 3 years.
Yeah, I believe it's a submission because it could take some time to get that one in, but I can clarify that. But it's within 3 years it would lapse on that side if you haven't got your technical matters in order. I'm not quite sure how long you have to implement your technical matters, but that would be.
I just think, Chairman, I think that's something that might be, were we to approve this, to sort of sweeten the pill, if you like, for the objectors, that this might not be something that ever happens. And if it doesn't happen, then the whole permission in principle lapses.
Further questions? Right, Councillor Williston.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that the nub of this, if it comes, we can approve it this evening, and it then comes through the technical issues, is the overlooking of number 14. Now, it can't be beyond the wit of man, I'd have thought, to change the. I know it's just an illustrative plan at the moment, but to change it around so the back of where the windows are being shown could be just bedroom areas, not the kitchen. If that were to be obscured glass, would that be acceptable out of interest?
Chairman, I must stress again that this is a permission in principle, and we cannot consider hypothetical situations. But I can reassure members that at the technical details consent stage, the impact on neighbouring amenity, including privacy, would be considered against the local planning and national planning policies at that time to ensure that they accord with them.
Can I come back to that?
You want further question?
Yeah, it's just a further issue with that answer. I mean, it seems to me that the current illustrative scheme is completely unacceptable. at the detail stage. So if that is the case and it can't be changed around, so there's no overlooking of number 14, I suppose in principle we should be saying that a no.
I think to try and reiterate, I agree with Mr. Brown that I don't want to go into hypotheticals, but if you were not to present that plan before you tonight and there's no building, it would be a blank sheet of paper and we wouldn't know if a building would sit on that. So the applicant in a way is damned if they do put it in and they're damned if they don't put it in. You can imagine what the layout that we're looking at here, you could chop the garage off, you could reduce it down to 2 bedrooms, then you'd have less parking, you'd have less amenity space. You could certainly shift around all the windows and that's what we'd consider at the technical matters stage. So you're entirely right. If you shifted all the windows to look out onto the woodland, maybe acceptable, maybe something we can consider at technical matters stage. So there's a bit of imagination here in terms of, is a dwelling of some sort going to fit on that site? It may not be what it looks like here because that might give you the turning space for the cars at the front. These are all things we'll have to consider if you grant permission in principle and take it to technical matters. But you're right, you could obscure glaze all of those, you could have boundary treatments it's all the hypotheticals and all the designs that we see that could solve the problems that we perceive.
Right, Councillor Gaines.
Mr. Brown, it says erection of minimum 1 single-storey dwelling. Could they, at a later stage, have a modification of this PIP to make it a 2-storey building?
Or 1.5. Yeah.
Chairman, whilst the applicant has decided to, in their application submissions, refer to a single-storey dwelling, the permission in principle does not in any way restrict the proposed dwelling at a later date. So they could come in at the technical details consent stage for a 2-storey or even 3-storey dwelling. That's the situation now.
I think that was the answer you were hoping for, correct? Further questions? Right, who's going to open the debate? Right, Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, members, the new point that I want to bring in, actually picking up on what Mr. Shepherd said, he said it was not out of character to develop in this part of the town this sort of site. Well, as Councillor Marsh said, there is no backland development at the moment in the whole of the estate that was built as part of Elizabeth Avenue. There have been bits of spare land, and yes, they have been garage blocks and they have been developed, but they are all developed in such a way that they apply to the building line of that particular road, notably the one in Pond Close that was very contentious and took 3 successive applications, as I think Councillor Hooker might remember, before it actually got through. And many of us didn't like it, but we were told we had no option. I think really the only argument that we can put up against permission in principle being granted is that this is out of character with the area on 2 counts. A, that it's the only backland development that has ever and is likely to ever be built in there, although that latter point, there are other sites with large gardens and with enough land down the side of them for you to get into the back of some of the larger houses. If you look on the map on page 29, there are existing roads, one leading to a substation just at the bend in Elizabeth Avenue before Middle Close, which takes you into what is a beautiful area of public open space known as Barn Close Orchard, which is a town council land that have now been developed as a community space with seating. Well, now, if you look at the land between Pond Close and Woodside, across which this hoped for public right-of-way exists, that is a very similar piece of land. It's not only a lovely piece of public open space, but it has considerable ecological value, which could be improved on, for example, by restoring the pond after which Pond Close is named. So my argument is that this is all going to be a waste of time for the applicant and everybody else if we give it approval, but maybe we can't refuse it for these technical reasons, many of which have been set out. But I think there is a strong reason to refuse permission in principle because it is out of character. It's a very constrained site for an area like this, which has quite generous gardens, built as it was in the early post-war period. many people would be lucky to have the sorts of gardens that the owner of number 13 has, which he's now going to give up to make some money out of building an extra house on the back, which nobody's going to really enjoy living in. But because we're so desperately short of houses, one little, perhaps, you know, bed sit put on that area, which I think is all it's capable of. I don't think we're doing this town any credit, this district any credit, by allowing permission in principle. That's my argument, Chairman, and we'll see what others think.
Thank you very much. Going around the table, right, the Vice Chairman, Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we are in a difficult position here. I think in principle, with the policies that we have, we would have to seriously consider approving it, because when we look at it, it is within the settlement boundary. It is within the new NPPF, and as we know, we desperately need houses, and this is another one, tick the box. I don't think this submission by the agent has done the applicant any good at all. If I was drafting this up, I certainly wouldn't want to have been confronted with the questions that lay people as we are have put, because, as I say, I think I would have tried to tick a few boxes that, you know, I'm nearly there, not I'll quickly knock a 3-bedroom, single-storey house up or bungalow up just to get the ball rolling, to get my foot in the door. I look at this, I see 3 bedrooms, 2 of which I can only get out of one side and out the bottom of the bed. And we haven't started reducing the footprint yet to increase the amenity value. I know we can drop off the garage and we can do this, that and the other. But I think as it's been submitted, unfortunately, to this committee, it's not done the agent a lot of good. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for those comments. Right, Councillor Abbs.
So, Chairman, I think it's a tough one. And obviously, with the new NPPF only coming out a couple of days ago, we have to be cognizant of that. And it's pretty tough staying up to speed with all this. But I think I'd like to move that the application be refused. It's contrary to the officer recommendation. My reason is that the proposal fails policy DP3 on the framework. That's the latest 17th I'm referring to, not anything earlier, which direct the development, which is not well designed, should be refused. Specifically, the site cannot, in my mind, and that's all I'm being asked in my mind, cannot be accommodate development indicated, or in my mind, any quality solution while achieving the things we've already talked about, the separation distances, private amenity space, outlook, daylight, habitable rooms, refuse vehicle access, turning circles, to the standards the councils would actually then go on to say is adoptable. That is a failure of function, and as well as not providing a high standard of amenity for future and existing occupiers. So under policy S4, 2C, failure to comply with the national decision-making policy that directs refusal means the benefits are substantially outweighed. In other words, I'd like the officers to actually give the proper words here, but I'd ask them to the precise wording of the reason to be delegated to the head of planning in consultation with the chair, with myself as the mover, to say, no, actually, this doesn't work. Let's put what I've just said in principle into the right words and refuse this application. So.
Does this find a seconder? Councillor Vickers?
I had a different reason, and I haven't got the policies in front of me precisely, but if, because Mr. Shepherd did explicitly say that he thought it was not out of character. Now, which of the policies covers that? I'd take advice from officers, but that's, I think, got to be one of the reasons that we give. I'm not sure exactly.
And I don't be quite happy
the other one
my
worked.
wording to include what Councillor Vickers is talking. So.
Fair enough. So you're happy with the inclusion of the seconders' comments?
Yeah, it's just another. Ideally, the officers give the final wording here, because it's a very, very borderline how we go with this. So we need to be, the officers need to get the final word. But the principle of what we've said, well, I've said rather, and now Councillor Vickers has said, is where we're heading. I just don't think we can put anything of value on this area that's available.
Thank you. Councillor. Sorry, I'll just take Councillor Dick and I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I listened carefully to what's been said. The honourable member opposite me used the word design. You put emphasis on the word design. Of course,
It's in the policy. Yeah.
If I may, we haven't got a design. That's the point. That's entirely the point. There is no design. I am very concerned, like everyone else, about overlooking, et cetera, but we're told very clearly by professional officers that is not a consideration for today. So having read carefully what has been written in terms of the report, I think my personal view is that we should support the officer recommendation and trust our officers to look after the neighbours of any future building should one be built on that site. In principle, we should accept the officer's recommendation, in my opinion.
Your comments are noted at this stage. I'm going to bring the legal officer because I think she wished to make some comments.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of the proposal that's been made and seconded, I would like to firm up the exact reasons tonight. I don't want it really to be delegated.
Can I come back? I don't
Because
support,
I think
sorry.
we need to know.
Don't support anything that includes that word design, because that is a matter for a technical stage application. As Councillor Dicker said, we're not talking about design. Councillor Abbs, I don't think was sufficiently clear. The only reason, as I said in my earlier contribution, I think the only reason we can put on a reason for refusal is that it's out of character owing to it being backland development and a very constrained site that is inappropriate in an estate that has much larger amenity areas and larger buildings, larger dwellings.
Yeah, the wording I'm looking for is that I think the proposal fails policy DP3 of the framework. I'm not bothered about the word design being in there at all. Now, Councillor Vickers has said he wanted the addition of.
Councillor Vickers, your head there, so I was.
I'm not supporting Councillor Abbs's reasons. If I could find a seconder for my other reasoning, I might do, but as I wasn't clear exactly what the reason was that Councillor Abbs had.
About this because we've got people who are saying we want to object to it, but they don't know why they're objecting.
Well, I'm also concerned as well because it's got to be quite a clear, transparent proposal, which is accepted by both the proposal and the seconder, and obviously the members that are going to vote need to know exactly what they're voting on. Sorry.
So I think in that case, I understand Councillor Vickers, you've sort of withdrawn your seconded of Councillor Abbs' proposal. So we've got your proposal. I think it would be helpful if Mr Shepherd or Mr Brown could maybe give their views on what the reasons could be for refusal. You can either accept them or not accept them. Firm up your proposal. If you've got a seconded, we'll then vote on that. If not, we'll obviously go on.
If that's allowed, that's great.
Well, I think we need to have some firm proposal for people to know whether they can second it and then vote on it, depending if they get a seconder. If that makes sense.
Okay. You coming in?
Yeah. So we'd look at similar wording to the proposed development of the site for a residential use comprising a single dwelling would detrimentally impact the character and appearance of the area, contrary to policies SP7 and the NPPF policies DP3 that have been referenced. We could include that it's due to owing to the backland nature of the development, if you wish. We could put that one in as well, but that would be a starting point for a reason for refusal, if that's your proposal.
I think it included the words I was looking for, the letters I was looking for, DP3. So I'm more than happy with that, Chairman.
And so your proposal stands, and
as
I'm happy with the wording that Mr Smith kindly gave us. Yes,
Mr Shepherd.
Sorry, Mr Shepherd. I wasn't looking at where the mouth was, confusing the voices.
Yeah.
So can I just clarify, is that with the backyard development, the extra bit?
The full wording Mr Shepherd gave us, I think that gives us several hooks on which to hang on.
Now, are other members quite clear in their own minds what the proposal is and what it includes?
That's definitely been seconded. by-
Yeah, councillor Vickers did actually put his hand up.
Would it be useful to for Mr. Shepherd to say
repeat it again?
what does that exactly?
It absolutely would, given that, yeah.
So we propose a reason for refusal on the proposed development of the site for residential use comprising a single dwelling would detrimentally impact on the character and appearance of the area, contrary to policies SP7 of the local plan and NPPF policies DP3 and S4 due to the backland development.
I'm a bit concerned about this because we still haven't got an appearance. So how can we deem it not to be appropriate? Point number one. Point number two, I'd be interested to know what the risk of appeal on this route is.
Would you like to?
Chairman, as Jake's report has, Mr. Brown's report has put in there, the three items that you can consider a permission in principle are in terms of the location. Now you're in Newbury, that is where we're looking for houses to go. The use, you are next to residential dwellings. There are residential dwellings in the whole area, and the use is one dwelling that complies in terms of our densities with our policies and our development plan. Jake's report is clear that in principle a dwelling can go on that site, and the risk of presenting a proposal or a reason for refusal, as we've discussed here, is an inspector will look at those three factors and might not side with committee on the proposed reason for refusal in terms of your concern for backland development. They may attribute backland development as you can then look at the amenity, you can then look at the distances, you can then look at the design at the technical matters stage. My concern is if we were to refuse it, we'd struggle to defend a reason for refusal at appeal because of the factors Jake has set out in his report.
Thank you for that. I think it's very useful, and I think that obviously now will be considered by members when I'm going to ask for the vote in a minute, unless it's something further to add to this.
It's just to be clear in dealing with Councillor Dick's point. I'm not considering the appearance of the building, because you're right, that's a technical matter for the technical stage. It's the appearance of the area, which I think was in the wording that Mr. Shepherd read out. It affects the appearance of the area. It's a kind of urban design issue that in an estate with no backland development, generous gardens, we are inevitably going to have a piece of backland development on a very constrained site. And that's affecting the appearance of the area, the nature, the character of the area. And if that's, officers can confirm that is a valid reason for a permission to be refused, then I think that wording is important as it affects the character of the area and by virtue of it being backland development here.
What I'd like you to suggest would be the proposed use. So you've got location, you've got use, and you've got the amount. So the use of that land for a dwelling is something that you're objecting to. So if I was to add in the proposed use of the development site for residential use comprising a single dwelling would detrimentally impact on the character and appearance of the area, as we discussed earlier. That would be how I would propose the wording of any reason for refusal that you would suggest. My concern with that is the factors we discussed earlier, that this is a residential development and brownfield site, which I would urge councillors to consider.
Right, Councillor Abs, final point.
Indeed, and we have been told many times in many committees that we shouldn't be worried about the appeal side. We have designated reasons. I'm not sure why Councillor Dick brought that one up, because he knows in the past that we shouldn't actually be looking at, or we may or may not. We are being asked to judge whether we think anything is buildable that's suitable on this site. And given that criteria with the wording that Mr. Shepherd's come up with, I am not convinced, and that is my prerogative as someone who sits on the council to say, I'm not convinced in principle I can build anything that's sensible here. So, hence, I move. Now, if the applicant had actually put forward an actual design that I could judge, I might have changed my mind, but this is where we are with the wording that we have tonight. So that's the reason for the refusal, and I hope you guys support it.
Okay. Sorry, I really need to put it to the vote, councillor Williston. Sorry, is it a new point or?
I think that's a good speech, yeah. To be honest, I would like to say something.
Well, I invited you because you haven't spoken up to this point.
I think this is a very difficult one to look at, but I'm afraid I believe the applicant has made a mistake in putting this design in, because I think it's coloured our views. And I think we should be looking at this, what it's meant to be, planning in principle. If it's half the size, it's probably possibly acceptable. But I don't see how we can, I certainly will not be voting on the current proposal, because I think it's a mistake.
Thank you for those comments. We've had a proposal from councillor Abbs, seconded by councillor Vickers. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour of the proposal to reject the application? 1, 2. Against? 6. And I shall abstain from the chair. So for anybody online, is 2 in favour of the motion to reject the application, 4 against and 1 abstention. Okay. 6 against. Sorry, 6 against. Yeah, okay.
Then you had
New proposal, right.
Could I make a proposal that we accept the officer's recommendation?
I'm happy to second that if that helps.
I haven't spoken yet. Can I speak before we go to the vote? I mean, I don't like the idea of this development, but I think the law and the regulations are very clear that we're only being asked for permission in principle, and I feel confident that the officers will, if we grant permission, look very carefully at all the technical things which will mitigate or prevent potentially any development actually happening. But I don't think we've got any legal way or choice other than to accept the officer's recommendation.
I think it's been a very helpful comment, Councillor Colson. I feel in a very similar position as you. I'm not happy either, but I feel that we have no alternative at this particular point. So, members, any other further comments?
I agree. And as I said in my statement, it was a very difficult one. In principle, with the policies we had, I've made my points of the negative side, but I think with what we've got before us, the policies we have to go forward to this and approve this, and we'll just wait. It's sure to come back when this comes back as a full plan and application. It's sure to come back to this committee if there is a committee, and maybe we'll get called in by the designated chair.
Well,
and it'll run the gauntlet of another committee. With the planning process.
It might not meet the criteria for calling, unfortunately, but that's another story for another day, Councillor Hooker. Members, we've had a proposal to accept officers' recommendations, seconded as well. All those in favour, please show. 7, 4 against, 2 against. I hope the Penny Post is listening to the result of that application. Thank you very much for your attendance. Do we need to have a recess now for 5 minutes? 2 minutes. 2 minutes then, okay, all right. 2 minutes and then we'll move on to the second application. Okay, members, we will reconvene and we are now moving on to item 4 in brackets 3, application 26/00858 at 3 Blake Road, Hermitage, Thatcham. The same procedure will follow, and I know we've got 2 representatives that are speakers. It will be the same format, and we will then immediately ask the case officer to present the case, and then the speakers will follow in the same format as the previous application. Other than the difference is, I think there will be a representative from the local council speaking as well. There is Hermitage Parish Council. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the officer presenting the case. And again, it's Jake Brown. Over to you, Jake.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully. It's the screen. Yes. This application seeks householder planning permission for a loft conversion and the insertion of 6 roof lights. The application site contains a detached residential property within a modern housing development. This application for planning permission has been brought to this committee for determination as 10 representations have been received objecting to the development proposed, and the recommendation by officers is to delegate to the development manager to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed in section 8.1 of the agenda report. As shown on the proposed plans, the proposal seeks to locate 3 roof lights on the front elevation, as shown here, and 3 roof lights on the rear elevation, as shown here. No other external works are proposed. The proposed roof lights would not project more than 150 millimetres beyond the plane of each roof slope and would be grey framed Velux type roof lights. The roof lights would facilitate a loft conversion to create an additional bedroom, which in itself would not require planning permission, as internal works to a dwelling do not constitute development under the Town and Country Planning Act. Therefore, only the impact of the insertion of 6 roof lights proposed is to be considered in the determination of this application. This photo shows the front elevation of the existing dwelling, and the 3 roof lights are proposed to be located on the roof here. This photo shows the rear elevation of the existing dwelling, and 3 roof lights are proposed to be located on the roof here. Here we have an example of an existing roof lights within the street scene that can be viewed from the public highway along Blake Road. This dwelling at number 6 Blake Road has 4 roof lights on the rear elevation, one of which can be seen from the road here. Number 6 Blake Road also has 3 roof lights on the front elevation that can be seen as shown here. Opposite the application site, one can see from the road the side and rear elevation of number 1 Pinewood Crescent and the existing roof lights on the rear roof slope as shown here. As seen at the committee site visits, roof lights are also visible in the wider area on the rear elevations of other properties in Pinewood Crescent. As set out in the agenda report, the principle of the development is supported by the local plan. In respect of the impact on the character and appearance of the area, roof lights exist in the immediate and wider area, and the roof lights proposed are not considered to introduce an incongruous feature within the street scene or harm the character and appearance of the area. The Hermitage Neighbourhood Plan Policy, HER2, states that development should demonstrate high quality design and layout which respects the local character of Hermitage, identified in the Hermitage Design Guidelines and Codes. That policy provides a list of principles that should be considered, including the principle that new development should be respectful of the architectural styles and use of materials of surrounding buildings, particularly in the case of residential development. As previously noted, roof lights of similar material and design exist in the immediate area, and therefore the proposal is considered to accord with policy HER2 of the Hermitage Neighbourhood Plan. The proposed roof lights are not considered to introduce any significant impact on neighbouring properties or biodiversity. As confirmed by the tree officer, protected trees adjacent to the site are unlikely to be affected by the insertion of 6 Velux windows proposed. A sustainability statement has been submitted, which states amongst other point that new glazing will be highly efficient double glazed units to minimise heat loss and solar gain. The development is therefore considered to accord with policy SP5 of the local plan review and policy HER4 of the Hermitage Neighbourhood Plan. The insertion of roof lights would not reduce the existing amenity space for the dwelling or require additional car parking spaces. It is acknowledged that the roof lights are to facilitate a loft conversion, but those internal works to increase the number of bedrooms from 4 to 5 do not require planning permission. As such, whilst a 5-bed dwelling would normally require the provision of 3 car parking spaces under the current local plan policy, the insertion of 6 roof lights themselves do not justify a requirement for an increase in parking spaces. As such, no objections have been raised by the local highway authority. Representations received have raised concern regarding the overdevelopment of the application site and the cumulative impact with a planning permission recently granted for the extension and conversion of the garage on site to a family room. Whilst each application is determined on its own merits, the insertion of 6 roof lights would not extend the footprint of the existing dwelling or materially increase its bulk or massing, and therefore would not harm the character and appearance of the area due to overdevelopment when considering the cumulative impact of both developments. As noted on the update sheet, since the publication of the committee agenda report on a revised National Planning Policy Framework was published by National Government on Monday, the 17th of August, and is a material consideration in a determination of this application. Officers have reviewed the proposal against the new national decision-making policies and remain satisfied that the proposal complies with the relevant provisions of the revised NPPF and that the recommendation for approval remains appropriate. Therefore, the recommendation by officers is to delegate to the development manager to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed in section 8.1 of the agenda report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Jake. No, Paul Goddard, Paul, you've got a couple highways issues to...
Yes, please. Chairman, concerning car parking provision. According to our car parking standards, as included in the West Berkshire local plan that was adopted just over a year ago, there's policy DM44, which for Hermitage, which is zone 3, a 4-bedroom house requires 3 car parking spaces. Of course, the dwelling was originally approved in 2012, which was prior to the current car parking standards. There are only 2 car parking spaces provided on site. This does not include the garage that was originally included because, as has been mentioned already in this meeting, garages are not counted as parking spaces because they are seldom used as such. Our parking standards only go up to 4-bedroom houses. We do not have parking standards for houses any larger than that. But there is a line within policy DM44, and it says where flats and houses are built with bedrooms in excess of the thresholds given in the table above. So that would include houses of more than 4 bedrooms. These will be assessed on an individual basis. So the question before you tonight is to assess this on an individual basis, whether there is much of a difference in parking demand between a 4 and 5 bedroom house, and only one house at that. The level of parking on the site will remain unchanged at 2 spaces. And I think, considering how we would potentially do any planning appeal, my advice to you is that I do not think there is sufficient difference between the parking requirement for a 4 or 5 bedroom house that I think would make it possible for us to defend an appeal. Of course, what you would need to consider is, will it place any additional parking pressure on the roads in this housing estate, which were built with a set of car parking standards that were less than what we have now. And my advice to you would be is that I don't think it would make sufficient difference for us to raise objection. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. We now move on to the speakers. The Parish Council, I think, have got a statement. Is that correct? And you're prepared to read it out. Is that correct, Councillor Dick? Yeah, and if you go to the lectern. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for context, recently I've been elected as Chairman of Hermitage Parish Council, but because I'm a member of this group, I do not take part in planning discussions. The person who normally would be here is on holiday, so I, with your permission, will read what she has sent on behalf of the Parish Council.
Away you go, sir.
Thank you. Hermitage is a service village in the North Wessex Downs national landscape in Zone 3 of the policy. There should be a minimum of 3 parking spaces for houses with 4 or more bedrooms. The proposal being considered includes an increase in the number of bedrooms from 4 to 5. That could generate 2 more vehicles. This policy should also apply to applications outside new developments. The Highways Officer is satisfied that the provision is adequate, but is the actual proposed provision in line with this policy? Question mark. The proposed plan shows only 2 serial parking spaces. Visiting the area in the evening or at weekends shows that the current provision on a bend is inadequate. The newly extended and popular Ealing Way active travel route passes along Blake Road, undoubtedly leading to greater cycle use. Hermitage Parish Council believes that you should refuse this application and that you do not have to accept the Highways Officer's advice, as it appears not to conform with the Council's own parking policies. HPC hopes that the committee will refuse this application. Thank you, Chairman. I'm not really in a position to.
No, I was going to say I was going to say that as well, Councillor Dick. Like, I feel it's not appropriate because you're Councillor Vickers. If you're going to ask Councillor Dick, he's just reading out a statement from the Parish Council.
But the statement included reference to inadequate parking, and I just wondered if Councillor Dick, from his local knowledge, and knowing that he and I both parked on the site visit in the car park a few, perhaps 100 metres away, the parish car park. I just want to be sure whether there is any restriction on the use of that car park at all, because I'm likely to raise.
Yeah. I was going to say that's that actually you're
not allowed to ask him a question at all, or
well. It's a difficult one. I'm sure he's going to be able to answer it, but of course, technically, he's a member of this committee as a ward member. So, yeah. So
he's not standing there as the ward member, Chairman.
No,
he's standing
there.
What would you have me do, Chairman?
Shall I just? I believe.
Sorry, one at a time, Madam.
Are you going to be speaking as ward member later?
No, there's not. No.
But I guess you can maybe answer the question in the debate.
Yeah, I can do
I
that.
think that would be my preference.
From my personal experience. Yeah, of
Yes,
course.
because otherwise you'll be
Okay,
answering for Hermitage and you're not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Fine. Thank you, Ms Salma.
Right, I now have objector and I've actually got three names here. Is there actually two of you speaking, or are you splitting it 2.5 minutes each? Right, okay, so if you'd both like to come to the lectern, and we'll notify you after 2.5 minutes, is that okay? Three and two, is it? Okay. Are you ready?
Yep. Okay. Good evening, everybody. With respect to the case officer, Helen Robertson, who is not present, I respectfully ask members not to approve the application as recommended. My view is the report is weak and flawed, and the case officer admits in their report that the application does not demonstrate compliance with the National Development Plan. Hermitage Parish Council and over 10 other objectors have stated that they are concerned about the overdevelopment of the property and it's not in keeping with the street scene. I'd also like to highlight that the planning officer present here, Jake Brown, had actually highlighted some photographs of properties that have been extended with roof lights. What I'd like the members to note is that those properties, with the exception of one, was actually built as with roof lights in place at the point of building. The report also relies on a single precedent of another neighbouring property, which is the point I've just made that Mr Brown made, saying that other properties actually refers to one property, which is number 6 Blake Road, and it's not planning policy and should not override the Hermitage National Development Plan. The officer claims this is not a duplicate of the previous application. However, the substance of the proposal, and I quote, insertion of roof lights to convert attic space, is identical to the previously refused application. And this was refused on the 8th of January under permitted development constraints. Whilst I appreciate members are considering this loft conversion, however, it is relevant to highlight the cumulative impact of the previously approved application. The officer dismisses cumulative impact by saying the garage conversion and construction of a link corridor from the main house, saying, quote, the garage has not yet commenced. However, for members to note, please, is that I was served with a third-party notice with plans for the development of the property, and the plans have been confirmed with the architect and will be followed by the appointed builder. This build with the plans that are not that are actually confirmed will be followed, will be in breach of the approved plans as there are significant changes from the approved plans. And I have submitted a report to West Berkshire Council with the plans to those responsible for enforcement, and they are currently investigating as the plans are significantly different and not non-material changes. The loft conversion adds a 5th bedroom, and to note it is a vast space and could potentially accommodate a 6th bedroom, although appreciating Mr Brown's comment that it's not building regulations for this to be approved. However, potentially this will impact the car parking space. The garage conversion adds habitable space, and the addition of a link corridor that now includes a roof lantern that was not approved also adds to the property's footprint. This is clearly an overdevelopment of the property and in breach of...
You're now on 3 minutes.
I therefore respectfully ask the neighbours to refuse the application, and also to note that the development of the garage actually reduces one of the car parking spaces and narrows it significantly. I now ask my neighbour to advise on planning and health and safety concerns with parking.
Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. May I just begin or?
Carry on. The clock's ticking.
All right, bear with us. My objection is based on material planning considerations relating to highway safety, parking impacts and risks to public safety arising from the potential construction and scaffolding operations of the project. Number one, highway safety concerns. Under the National Planning Policy Framework, development should only be approved where there is safe and suitable access for all users. I'm concerned that the increased traffic would create additional hazards for pedestrians, cyclists, other road users. Existing junctions, access points may not be safely accommodated. The additional vehicle movements, emergency vehicle access could be impeded. Given these factors, the proposal may fail to demonstrate that it provides a safe and suitable access arrangement. Secondly, unsafe parking and overspill. Parking development appears to provide insufficient parking provision for the likely number of occupants, visitors, contractors and service vehicles. This is likely to result in hazardous parking to house owners, overspill parking on surrounding residential roads, obstructions of footways, pedestrian routes, reduced road width, etc. Increased risks for children, elderly residents and disabled pedestrians, of which, as a family estate, there are many. The third consideration, construction traffic. I'm also concerned about the safety implications arising during the construction phase, should it go ahead. Construction work are likely to require heavy goods, temporary road obstructions, plant materials, scaffolding, elevated construction activities adjacent to public areas. This is a foreseeable risk of tools and debris and equipment falling from scaffold and elevated work areas. The Health and Safety Executive recognises failing objects as significant hazard in construction activities. And lastly, under section 70...
Can you conclude? It's coming up to 5 minutes.
Basically, I respectfully submit the risks outlined, and in conclusion, I request that the council refuse planning permission for this development. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Right, members, any questions for the objectors? Right, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it's not part of this application, but just for interest, what is actually proposed for the garage conversion?
If I just may give you some context.
Can you get near the microphone, please?
Beg pardon. Just for context, to answer your question, Councillor, the garage conversion is, I think Mr Brown will have a picture of the current application, but not actually of the proposed view of what both developments will look like. The development of and the change of use for the garage is actually a joint garage. It's a garage jointly owned by myself and will actually be converted to habitable space and also will provide a link corridor which will be knocked through from the main part of the house. And this development with the line of sight from the corridor and the fence which will be relocated will actually reduce quite significantly the width of their permitted driveway space and the front space which is currently used, which the planning officer actually, to quote, had said, it does look tight, but it may be okay. That just seems that that's not been viewed in the way that it should have been. If we reduce that car parking area, potentially one of those vehicles spaces will actually have to be accommodated elsewhere. And also to address the question about Village Hall parking, residents are not permitted to park in Hermitage Village Hall car park overnight.
Okay, right, Councillor Abs.
Yeah, thank you first for a very nice presentation, succinct and to the point. You mentioned, and you were just talking about it there, the width of the remaining parking spaces after permission has been given for the conversion. Do you have the details? Do you have the numbers associated with the width? I mean, I've heard it's narrow and it's tight, but do you have the actual number? Has anybody got the actual number?
The architect hasn't provided the actual number, but the drawings of the application that has already been approved actually provides the movement of the fence boundary, which would reduce the space in front of the garage space.
So I can ask the officer to clarify
absolutely.
for me. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay.
Further questions, members? No? Okay, well, you can both return to your seats. Okay. Now, on Zoom, I'm hoping Mr. and Mrs. Tandem are available to speak as the I'm presuming the applicant.
Yes, hi. Good evening. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yes. Okay. Are you going to both speak or is it just yourself, sir?
No, it's only me.
Okay. And you are aware you've got 5 minutes and we will notify you after 4 minutes if it's your wish.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so just to respond to some of the comments or objections made, right? So first on the parking situation itself, I just want to place the actual facts. So we are building this extra bedroom because our daughter, who's in the university, is returning back here to work. She's already insured on one of the cars we have, and there is no plan for us to buy additional cars. So there will be no impact on additional parking because of the extra bedroom. That's point one. Being linked to garage conversion, so that application was approved through an appropriate process, and we will abide by constructing what is approved. In case there will be any change to that, we will go through the required process to make those amendments before we start construction. We will never start a construction which is not in line with the approval which we would have received from the planning permission. So we will follow all the due process. We will abide by the approvals that has been given to us. And in context with the third party approval, that was part of the process because our neighbor objected that unless that is done, you cannot start the construction. So we followed the process. The point being, we will follow all the required process. We trust the process and we will abide by what approvals are given to us. And coming back to the original loft parking, we have no intention whatsoever to add parking to cars to our household. So there will be no additional, impact on the parking. So that's what we want to state.
Does that complete your presentation?
That's right.
Okay, I'm just looking around the table. No, I don't see any hands up at the moment. So no, I don't think there's any members wish to ask any questions of you. So thanks very much for your presentation. We now move over to the ward members, and I'm looking on the screen, Councillor Dick, because Councillor. Yes, I think Codlin is actually on the screen, but I'm not certain whether. Were you just listening in, Councillor Codlin?
No, I would like to speak, please.
Oh, right. Okay. You're happy, right? Okay. I wasn't certain how you'd arranged it. Okay, Councillor Codlin, are you ready to commence?
I certainly am. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wasn't going to speak on this one originally, but I actually missed the site visit last week as I was away, but I had the opportunity to go out today and have a look round. And I've had another look at the plans, and I am a bit concerned about this one from the point of view that, yes, it's a separate application from the link to the garage, but I do wonder if it had been taken as one application as the whole, it would have been seen as an overdevelopment of the site. I do understand that we have to take each application on its own merits, but I believe that this extension into the loft now will make this overdevelopment of the site, particularly around the car parking. The plans you have in front of you don't show the link to the garage that is proposed, and I think it should do. Even though it's not yet being built, it's got a permission to happen, and I think that the narrowing where that link to the garage, the narrowing of the first car park space, will make it almost impossible. I don't have the figures in front of me, the measurements. I would like the officers to provide those if they can. But I think that that is too narrow. You might be able to get a car in there, but you might not get out of it except through the roof. And so I think it would be down to one parking space. The other thing is, I think that the roof is large. If it was converted, it potentially could be 6-bedroom house. And this applicant may not be intending to have more than 2 cars on the site, but a future purchaser could, and you could have 4 or 5 cars. And no, people are not supposed to leave their cars in the hall car park overnight or any other time unless they're using the hall. The car park is linked to the hall only, though I know quite a lot of people use it when they're going dog walking or whatever. So I would like to ask the committee members to consider this very carefully, that if this is overdevelopment of the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Codlin. Right, members, questions for your fellow councillor? No, there's no questions at the moment, Councillor Codlin. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. We now move on to question officers. Right, Councillor Earps, you're the first one.
Yeah,
on
well,
this.
obviously the question is for Mr. Goddard, who I'm sure has had plenty of time to prepare now. Go.
You haven't asked the question yet.
Same question as asked earlier. So. Sorry, about the widths of the remaining space.
Sorry.
Okay, so I was being slightly flippant there because we've just 2 presenters both talking about the narrowing of one of the 2 spaces, making it, in fact, not 2 spaces, but 1 space. And we're looking for the measurements associated with and the officer's advice on what the real situation is in terms of the actual number of remaining spaces, given what's being developed.
Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you're looking dazzled.
Yes,
bamboozled.
Unfortunately, we're not here tonight to assess that particular planning application that converted the garage and provided the link. But I have had a look at the plans with Mr. Brown here, and a car parking space dimension should be 2.4 by 4.8. And the plans that are before us show 2 car parking spaces of dimensions of 2.4 by 4.8. And therefore, we raise no objection to that planning application. And therefore, I think the 2 car parking spaces are provided and were retained with that proposal and are here before you tonight, would be my advice.
Further questions?
Yeah, well, yes. In your initial presentation, Mr. Goddard, I heard you infer that it would be up to us to decide about this 4 or 5 bedroomed and how much impact it would have. You didn't seem to say, well, you might be comfortable with it, but you seem to leave it open to the councillors to maybe take a different view. Did I understand rather what you said, or?
No, you are correct, because there is the line, and it's in policy DM44, which is on page 250 of the local plan, where it says where flats and houses are built with bedrooms in excess of the thresholds given in the table above, these will be assessed on an individual basis. And the question before you is whether you consider that an extra bedroom, increasing an already large house from 4 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms, will have such an impact on on-street car parking that we should refuse the planning application. And my advice to you is that it should not, but it is up to members to make a decision.
Sorry,
I just need to ask one little bit of clarification.
Sure.
Again, and I want to go back to the widths that you just mentioned, 4.8, 4.8, and so on. That's based off of what's in front of us, but what's been presented by others says that one of those isn't 4.8. They both can't be. They've said it's narrower. Is that because we're not taking into account the passageway between the existing garage and the house? And because that's not in the plans in front of us, and therefore it looks 4.8 and 4.8.
Right, I think Jake's actually looking at the
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't see them. No eyes at the back of my head.
Thank you, Chairman. I think if you permit, I can share a screen showing the plan that has been approved.
I'm sorry, it's not appropriate. It might be an answer that you wish to pass on, but unfortunately, we're not able to take it at this point.
So this is the approved plan. This is the extant permission that the applicant can implement in time. Here we have the front elevation. The glazed link referred to is this area here. The existing garage door is being reduced in width, and there's a passageway that's being created through the garage. If I scroll down and zoom in, I'm able to. So here is the passageway that's being created through the existing garage. That's the reduced garage door and store area. This is the link wall to the existing house, where a kitchen diner, the family room that's being created, and a utility room. So the area in question, I believe, is this area here. If we move to the block plan, and zoom in here, you can see a dashed lines showing the parking spaces. When they're scaled from the plans, they actually measure near on 5 meters in length and just over 2.4 meters in width, 2.4748 meters. And one can see, sorry.
I would add that that's the dimensions required within the manual for streets. So those car parking spaces do comply to standard.
Okay, Councillor Abbs?
That's perfect. Thank you. The diagram really helped.
Okay, right. Councillor Vickers were the next on the list, and then yourself.
I don't think I had my hand.
Oh, didn't you? Okay, all right. Well, Councillor Colson was next then.
So I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, can the officers just clarify whether we can even consider what we've just seen on the screen tonight? Because my understanding is that we're only able to consider the application that's in front of us.
So you can only consider the development that's presented to you. I think the purpose of showing the parking spaces to show that they're retained as well as that one. But you can only determine this application in regards to the creation of the roof lines.
Thank you. Just one other question I've got for Mr. Goddard. The statement from Hermitage Parish Council said they disagreed with your views on parking. I just wanted to confirm that you disagree with Hermitage Parish Council views, please.
They are most entitled to their views. Cool. I have referred to the car parking standards and quoted them for you. And it's for you to make a decision on that basis.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Dick was the next one on the list.
It's an unusual situation for me particularly, and the reason I don't speak as a ward member, because I watch ward members do it, and if you want to take part in the debate properly and have an informed decision and therefore vote, then all I could have said was, well, this is quite good and this is not quite good. You can work that out for yourselves. But there was a question asked of me earlier, and this may well help. When we had the site visit, that very question was asked because as you've heard, some of the residents are saying that, yes, there is an approved plan to alter the garage, but they have seen what the builders are planning to do, and it's different from what has been approved. So, and the officer who was there, Mr. Brown, was pointed out to him very clearly, and these good people, who you can understand the frustration, but they were advised to go to enforcement, and I know they've written at length to enforcement. The question was then asked, okay, in terms of comment on parking, which is kind of related, isn't it? Are you sure you're looking at the up-to-date plans? In other words, including the latest approved plans? And the answer was yes. So that was the basis on which we proceeded there. And as regards parking in the village hall, although it's on land owned by the parish council, it's run by its own trust. It's often full. It's a big problem. They have two big halls. When they have events on, it's full. Yes, people park there routinely, walking their dogs or whatever. Technically, they should have permission. Why did I park there? Because Blake Road is rather narrow. You've been on it. There's quite a bend there, and there's quite a lot of houses further on down. Quite a lot of houses. So I deemed it not safe, regardless of anybody else's view, not to park in Blake Road. But I
thought it was appropriate.
You also given information. Sorry.
Oh God, I pressed the right one, sorry. I allowed you to continue on, councillors, because I thought it was appropriate to inform members of some of the points which probably needed to be addressed. And
well, thank you. I was going to finish by saying to Mr. Goddard, are you sure?
Yeah, and that was your question.
That's my question.
Okay. There we are. Are you sure?
Well, Chairman, I didn't take part in the site visit, but Mr. Brown did. If there's an enforcement issue, then our planning enforcement colleagues will, I'm sure, look into it. But they should be building to the plans that Mr. Brown showed you on the screen just now.
It's not appropriate. I'm asking about that. I'm asking about parking spaces.
I am sure from the plans that I've seen, they should be building them.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dick. No further questions, members? Okay, right. Who's the member going to open the debate on this application? Okay, right. Oh, good. Good. Do you put your hand up, Councillor Williston?
I mean, this is, I think, another difficult one, isn't it? Because if you look at the logic of what we're being asked to give approval or not, there's no doubt in my mind we should be giving approval. But equally, there is concern. I mean, I know about overdevelopment, and parking is an issue. I mean, I accept the fact that the house was built in 2012 and that was the rules of the time. But making a 5-bedroom house with only 2 car parking spaces doesn't really feel quite right. So I'm frankly on the balance on this one. For what it's worth.
Valid point, Councillor Williston. Right, Councillor Abs.
Yeah, you wouldn't normally think this would take much thinking. But if I put the car parking in a different, rather than just saying it's only 1 extra parking spaces, and say, well, it's actually 50% more than is allowed in our guidance, it sounds a little bit different. Lies, bloody lies and statistics. So I'm going to stick with it's 50% more under our own rules, rule-led, therefore no.
Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. When I left the site visit, I had no doubt in my mind that this probably should be approved, subject to what I heard tonight. But having seen those plans, I know they're already approved, but I'm trying to imagine how you use that space, even if it is sufficiently wide according to standards. How, if you go forwards into that space, how are you going to open the driver's door unless you've got a left-hand drive? If you back in, you can only get out of it if you impose yourself on the neighbour's section of the driveway, which might have their car parked in such a way that you can't open your door. I mean, it's bad enough in a public car park where there are no walls, but here you've got one side of that space that is constrained by a wall that is yet to be built, never mind whether it's going to be built exactly where it should be. And I believe the applicant when he said that, he's going to follow the drawings and he will make sure that his builder will. And yes, if he doesn't, it's an enforcement matter. But I don't see, if it's built as it is, how you can use 2 spaces off-road on that property. Even if you've got 2 cars, that's one that's going to have to park on the road. Now, great that this particular applicant has 2 cars, but as Councillor Codling says, we have to look at some future occupier. Now, Hermitage is an ideal site for people that commute by motorway. So I think of all the places in the district, it's one where we should take our parking standards seriously, and so should the occupants there. But no, there's no rule that says you can't have as many cars or even more than there is space on the roads. And I, like Councillor Dick, didn't park on that road because I could see it was very narrow and it was going to be inconvenient to the residents and mine unsafe. So I'm very struggling to be able to support officers' recommendations, but I don't think that reason alone, the parking reason, is likely to be sufficient to withstand an appeal. That's the trouble.
Thanks, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Coulson, I think the next councillor, and then you Councillor Gaines.
Like Councillor Wollaston, I think this is difficult, but we're not allowed, we can't take into account this other application. So what's before us is the parking spaces as they are now. And they are 2 usable parking spaces. And, you know, I think we probably have to accept it. Thank you.
Councillor Gaines.
I agree with Councillor Colston. Basically, this is an application for the loft conversion and insertion of roof lights. If there hadn't have been condition 20 on the original plan application, removing permitted developments, then those roof lights wouldn't even be at this committee, and we wouldn't be having that decision. So I can't see how we can't actually go with officers' recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Right, we've had quite a few comments. Is anybody come forward with a proposal?
Chair, I'm happy to propose officers' recommendations even.
Okay, does that find a seconder? Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and what do you wish to have as any conditions within the proposal? Is there anything we need to consider to include?
I don't think the conditions are listed in the reports. If you're all happy, there's nothing further I would need to add from your debate.
Okay.
Happy with the conditions in the paper.
And you're happy, okay. Without further ado, then, we've had a proposal to accept officers' recommendation. Can I have a show of hands then, please?
I think we should be able to take into account what's already approved as though it was already there. I think Councillor Codling was right when she said that, you know, we should at least have had it shown on our plans as dotted and approved, like we do when we have the before and after on an application that's already been approved. May not be there, but if a variation comes in, you show the existing, even though it's not built, as well as the, you know, we can't refuse the approved application, but we should be able to take into account the consequences of that approval upon this application. That was my point. So I'm unhappy voting either way on that basis.
Okay, thank you. So for anybody watching on screen, it was 7, was it 6 for the proposal, 2 against and 1 abstention. Okay, thank you very much for your attendance.